Introduction. Why definitions matter. Language is the bridge between thought and reality. Every sentence you speak, every idea you share, is an attempt to carry what is in your mind across to someone else's. That bridge is made out of words. When the bridge is solid, ideas travel safely. When the bridge is weak, they collapse halfway, falling into confusion. When the bridge is deliberately twisted, ideas don't just collapse, they get hijacked. That is why definitions matter. Words as containers. Think of a word as a container for thought. It holds meaning inside it, and when you hand that word to another person, you expect them to receive the same meaning you put in. But what if the container is cracked? The meaning leaks. What if the container is mislabeled? The meaning is swapped. And what if the container is deliberately altered? Then the meaning can be manipulated. This is not just a problem of grammar or style. It is a problem of survival. Civilizations depend on stable definitions. When words collapse, agreements collapse. When agreements collapse, trust collapses. And when trust collapses, society itself begins to fray. Vagueness and drift. Two main forces weaken language. Vagueness and drift. Vagueness is when a word is fuzzy by design. Politicians love it. Advertisers thrive on it. Fair, safe, green, patriotic. They sound powerful but mean different things to different people. Vagueness lets speakers hide behind the fog, promising everything and nothing at the same time. Drift is when the meaning of a word changes over time, sometimes naturally, sometimes by design. Once, awful meant awe-inspiring. Today, it means terrible. Once, liberal meant generous. Now it points to a political identity. Meanings drift. And if you don't notice, you might accept a word today as if it still meant what it did yesterday. Both vagueness and drift are tools of manipulation. If people can't agree on what words mean, they can't agree on reality. The precision advantage. This book is training in precision, not pedantry, not nitpicking, but the skill of knowing what words mean and using them with care. Why does this matter? Because precision in language creates precision in thought, and precision in thought creates clarity in life. When you know what you mean, you can say what you mean. When you say what you mean, others can respond honestly. And when definitions are stable, manipulation fails. The goal of this book will give you three things. One, the foundations of definition. You will learn what a definition is, how vagueness and drift corrode it, and why stable boundaries matter. Two, the tools of definition. You will practice with identity words, boundary words, process words, value words, and operational definitions. Three, the defense systems. You will learn how to spot equivocation, euphemism, emotional packaging, and empty words, and how to disarm them. Then we'll put it all to work in daily conversation, in study and work, in media and advertising, and in how you define yourself. Finally, we'll end with a mindset. How to live as a person who uses words as tools, not as traps. Why this matters now. We live in an age of information, but also of distortion. Every day, words are bent and stretched until they barely mean anything at all. News headlines, political slogans, corporate ads, social media posts. They bombard you with words designed to stir emotion, not to clarify truth. If you cannot hold on to definitions, you will be pulled by every current. But if you anchor words carefully, you create a firewall for your own mind. The promise of precision. Clarity is not glamorous. It doesn't trend. It doesn't spark applause. But clarity is freedom. When you hold precise definitions, no one can trick you with double meanings. No one can trap you with empty slogans. And no one can drag you into confusion with vagueness. That is the promise of definition. Not perfect speech, not endless argument, but a clear mind. So let us begin. Words are containers. If the container is cracked, meaning leaks. If the container is strong, meaning is safe. This book is about building strong containers. Welcome to Definition Academy. The language of clarity. Chapter 1. What is a definition? The fence of meaning. A definition is a boundary. It is the invisible fence that marks where a word begins and ends. Without that fence, words blur, and blurred words blur thought. Think of the word triangle. By definition, a triangle is a closed shape with three sides. If you add a fourth side, it is no longer a triangle. It has crossed the fence into another category, like square or quadrilateral. This is the power of a definition. It keeps the meaning intact. It tells us, this is in, that is out. Now imagine what happens if that fence collapses. If triangle came to mean any shape with at least three sides, then the word would no longer help us distinguish between a triangle, a square, or a pentagon. Communication would weaken. Geometry would become messy. Confusion would spread. The same principle applies not only in mathematics, but in law, politics, ethics, and everyday life. When the fence around a word collapses, manipulation begins. The agreement of language. Every language is a massive agreement among its speakers. We agree that water refers to the liquid we drink, that sun refers to the bright star above, that friend refers to a person we trust. Definitions are the rules of that agreement. They make it possible for us to share ideas without endless clarification. But agreements can be broken. If one person quietly shifts a definition, the shared reality weakens. For example, if a law quietly redefines person to include a corporation, then a word that once meant human being suddenly carries an entirely different weight. Definitions are not just fences. They are contracts. And every contract can be honored, neglected, or betrayed. When the fence is missing, ask 10 people what fair means, and you'll get 10 different answers. Everyone gets the same amount. Everyone gets what they earned. Everyone gets what they need. Nobody gets more than others. All of those answers conflict, and yet people use the word fair as if it were self-evident. Politicians promise a fair deal. Children cry out, that's not fair. But unless the fence is drawn clearly, the word is an empty shell, ready for anyone to pour their own meaning into it. This is the danger of using undefined words. People argue for hours without realizing they're not even talking about the same thing. The cost of undefined words. When definitions are missing, three things happen. 1. Confusion. People talk past each other, believing they disagree when they might not, or believing they agree when they actually don't. 2. Manipulation. Leaders, advertisers, or influencers exploit undefined words to sway emotions without committing to substance. 3. Conflict. Misunderstandings escalate. Battles are fought over shadows, because the real subject was never defined. The cost is not only intellectual, it is social, political, and personal. Definition as defense. Knowing the definition of a word is not pedantry. It is defense. When someone says, "We need justice," your first question should be, what do you mean by justice? When someone says, "This law protects freedom," ask, what freedom? Defined how? When someone says, "This product is safe," ask, safe under what conditions? For whom? According to what test? Definitions are shields. They prevent you from being captured by vagueness or seduced by slogans. They force clarity before agreement. The power of asking, what do you mean? One of the most powerful habits you can develop is a simple question. What do you mean by that? It disarms manipulation instantly. It clarifies misunderstandings before they grow. And it forces others to reveal whether they have thought carefully or are hiding behind a fog of words. It is not an attack. It is a request for clarity. Yet it often feels like a spotlight because it exposes the shaky ground beneath so much language. The beginning of clarity. So, what is a definition? A definition is a boundary that protects meaning, an agreement that makes communication possible, a defense against manipulation. When the fences of language are strong, thought is strong. When they are weak, thought is weak. This is the foundation of clear thinking. If you cannot define, you cannot defend. Closing thought for Chapter 1. Every time you use a word, you are either strengthening or weakening the bridge between thought and reality. A definition is the tool that makes the bridge solid. Without definitions, words become slogans, slogans become weapons, and weapons become chains. With definitions, words become tools, tools become understanding, and understanding becomes freedom. That is why we begin here, with the fence of meaning. In the next chapter, we will look at what happens when those fences blur. The danger of vagueness. Chapter 2, the danger of vagueness. The fog of words. If a definition is a fence, then vagueness is the fog that erases the fence line. Suddenly you cannot see where the word begins or ends. You hear it spoken, but you cannot tell what territory it actually covers. This is not an abstract problem. Vagueness is the default state of much human language. It sneaks into speeches, contracts, and conversations, often by design. When a politician says, "We stand for progress," the word progress creates an emotional lift. But what does it mean? Does it mean economic growth, cultural change, technological expansion, or simply more power for the politician's own group? Without a definition, progress is a fog bank. You feel something, but you cannot see clearly. Why vagueness is so attractive? Vague words survive because they are useful, not for clarity, but for persuasion. Vagueness feels safe because it lets each listener insert their own meaning. When an advertiser says, "Our product is natural," people imagine whatever natural means to them: clean, safe, pure, healthy. When a political campaign promises a fair deal, voters project their own idea of fairness onto the slogan. When someone says, "This policy is about freedom," they leave the content blank, and the audience fills it in with personal hopes. The speaker wins because everyone nods along, believing the word agrees with them. Vagueness is camouflage. It hides difference behind the illusion of unity. The double-edged sword of comfort words. Many of the most dangerous vague words are what we might call comfort words, terms that calm or inspire without defining. Words like safe, sustainable, equitable, inclusive, family-friendly. Each one sounds positive, but each is elastic. What feels safe for one group may feel restrictive for another. What counts as inclusive for one community may feel like exclusion to someone else. Comfort words protect the speaker more than the listener. They make resistance seem heartless. Are you against safety? Against fairness? Against inclusivity? By making the word vague, the speaker wins before the debate even starts. When vagueness is deadly, vagueness is not only a trick of rhetoric, it can be lethal in law, medicine, and conflict. A vague contract lets corporations wriggle out of responsibility. A vague diagnosis delays treatment. A vague military order causes unnecessary destruction. History is filled with disasters caused by imprecise language. A single undefined term in a treaty has sparked wars. A single blurred phrase in a law has stripped citizens of rights. Vagueness is not innocent. It is the most polite disguise of power. How to detect vagueness? Fortunately, vagueness is easy to spot once you start looking for it. Listen for words that, one, sound good but stand empty. They create a positive feeling without measurable content. Example: this will create a sustainable future. Sustainable how? By what standard? To shift depending on the speaker. The meaning bends each time the word is used. Example: freedom can mean absence of rules or ability to enforce rules, depending on who says it. 3. Resist testing. You cannot draw a line around the word or check whether it applies. Example: this company values fairness. How would you measure that? Whenever you encounter a word that seems to carry more emotion than clarity, you may be facing vagueness. The antidote to vagueness. The cure for vagueness is the question: what exactly do you mean? When someone says, "This law is fair," ask, "Fair according to which principle?" When an ad promises, "This food is natural," ask, "Natural compared to what?" Defined by whom? When a politician declares, "We are fighting for freedom," ask, "Freedom in what sense? And for which group?" Precision is not pedantic. It is protective. By insisting on clear definitions, you cut through the fog and see the fence line again. The courage to challenge. Spotting vagueness is easy. Challenging it takes courage. Many people shy away from asking for definitions because they fear looking difficult, pedantic, or combative. But notice this. Manipulation thrives only when vagueness goes unchallenged. The moment you ask, "What do you mean?" the trick is exposed. Often, the speaker either sharpens the word, which improves the conversation, or stumbles, revealing that the word was never meant to hold real meaning in the first place. Asking for clarity is not an attack. It is an act of intellectual honesty. Closing thought for Chapter 2. Vagueness is the fog that hides meaning. It allows manipulation, multiplies confusion, and weakens trust. The antidote is simple, though not always easy. Demand definition. Ask, "What exactly do you mean?" Every time you pierce vagueness with clarity, you strengthen the bridge between thought and reality. In the next chapter, we will explore not just how words become vague, but how they drift, shifting in meaning over time, sometimes naturally, sometimes by deliberate design. Chapter 3. The Drift of Language, the River of Words. Language is never still. Words flow like a river, changing shape as they pass from one generation to the next. What your grandparents meant by a word is not always what you mean by it. What you mean may not be what your children hear. This shifting of meaning is called drift. Sometimes it happens gradually, through everyday use. Other times it happens abruptly, through deliberate redefinition. Either way, drift can enrich language or corrupt it. When unnoticed, drift confuses. When exploited, drift manipulates. Natural drift. Awful once meant full of awe. A cathedral could be called awful in the sense of grand, majestic, terrifyingly beautiful. Over time, the word shrank until it meant merely bad. Villain once referred to a farmhand, someone from the villa or countryside. Over centuries, it drifted into meaning criminal, then antagonist. Nice originally meant foolish or ignorant. Now it means pleasant. These shifts are not sinister. They are the natural play of human speech, bending words over time until they no longer resemble their roots. But while natural drift can be harmless, it can also hollow out important distinctions. If awful once held a sacred weight and now means nothing more than unpleasant, we lose nuance. Our toolbox shrinks. Strategic drift. Not all drift is innocent. Words can be deliberately shifted to serve an agenda. Consider the word liberty. In one era, it meant freedom from government interference. In another, it was redefined to mean participation in government control. The same word, two opposite meanings, both flying under the same flag. Or take tolerance. It once meant enduring something you disagreed with. Now, in some circles, it has drifted to mean celebrating or affirming what you once merely endured. Drift like this doesn't just happen. It is encouraged. Why? Because redefined words can change behavior without anyone noticing. If you accept the new meaning unconsciously, you also accept the new rules it implies. The silent power of redefinition. Why fight to change people's minds when you can simply change the meaning of the words they use? Redefine marriage, and you reshape family structure. Redefine person, and you reshape law. Redefine violence to include words, and you reshape free speech. This is the silent power of redefinition. It bypasses debate. Instead of persuading you to change your beliefs, it quietly changes the words so that your beliefs are recoded. How drift is hidden. Strategic drift often hides behind the appearance of natural drift. People are told, the language is evolving, as if all change is innocent. But not all drift is organic. Some is engineered. It may be pushed through media repetition, educational reforms, or official documents. When a new definition is printed in school books or broadcast in headlines often enough, it starts to feel inevitable. Resistance is framed as ignorance, stubbornness, or hatred. The result is that people surrender not just their vocabulary, but their conceptual ground. They begin to think differently without realizing that the change began with words. Guarding against drift. So how do we defend ourselves against the drift of language? One, historical awareness. Know the roots of words. Learn what they meant 50, 100, or 200 years ago. A single glance backward can expose manipulation today. Two, ask for clarity. When a word feels slippery, pause the conversation. Ask, what do you mean by that word right now in this context? Three, resist silent redefinitions. Don't passively accept new meanings without noticing the consequences. If the new meaning expands clarity, embrace it. If it obscures reality, resist it. The two sides of drift. Drift is not always bad. Language must adapt. New technologies, new discoveries, new ways of living all require new meanings. The danger comes when drift erases distinctions that matter, when it blurs lines that protect thought and law. The task is not to freeze language, but to guard it. Let words grow where growth brings clarity. Stop them where growth brings confusion. Closing thought for Chapter 3. Language drifts like a river. Sometimes it nourishes. Sometimes it floods. To think clearly, you must notice when the banks are shifting. Every time a word changes meaning, ask, did this drift help clarity? Or did it weaken it? Did it add light? Or did it add fog? If you can spot the drift, you can choose whether to sail with it or step back onto firm ground. In the next chapter, we will learn how to tell the difference when a definition must be nailed down firmly and when a little flexibility is harmless. Chapter 4. Stable definitions versus flexible use. The balancing. Not all words carry the same weight. Some are the bedrock of law, science, and philosophy. Others are the playthings of everyday life, constantly shifting with culture and slang. You do not need the same level of precision when you say, that movie was cool, as when you say, this contract is valid. One is social shorthand, the other is a legal anchor. The art of clear thinking is knowing which words must remain stable and which can flex without damage. When precision is non-negotiable, some words cannot drift without tearing the system apart. These are the words tied to rights, contracts, and laws, the structures of society. Contract must mean a binding agreement between parties. Murder must mean the unlawful taking of a life. Citizen must mean a legally recognized member of a nation. Property must mean something that can be owned and defended. If any of these words drift into vagueness, chaos follows. A contract becomes meaningless. A law becomes unenforceable. A right becomes just a slogan. Stable definitions in these areas protect more than speech. They protect freedom. When flexibility is harmless, other words can stretch without much harm. Slang, metaphors, and cultural terms fall into this category. Cool once meant cold. Then it meant stylish. Now it can mean agreeable. Nobody's rights are violated by that drift. Sick once meant ill. In some communities, it now means impressive. Context usually clears up the difference. Literally is now used figuratively. Annoying to some, but not civilization breaking. Flexibility in these cases makes language playful and expressive. It adds color, even if it sometimes irritates purists. The gray zone. But between the stable and the flexible lies a dangerous middle ground. Words that feel harmless until someone weaponizes them. Consider justice. Does it mean punishment? Fairness? Restitution? Social balance? Freedom. Does it mean absence of control or the ability to act within rules? Violence. Does it mean physical harm only or also words that cause emotional harm? These words drift easily because they live at the border of emotion and law. Left flexible, they allow manipulation. Locked down too tightly, they can stifle nuance. The key is vigilance. In casual use, these words may flex. In formal use, law, policy, contracts, They must be defined sharply, or they become weapons. The trick of strategic flexibility. One of the oldest tricks in politics is to use a word in its stable sense to inspire trust, and in its flexible sense to smuggle and control. A speaker might invoke freedom in the sense of individual liberty, but then legislate freedom in the sense of government-approved rights. The same word, two fences, blurred together. This is where you must slow down. Ask, is this word being used in its precise form or its flexible form? And does the shift serve clarity or control? Practical rule of thumb. To live with clarity, divide words into three zones. One non-negotiable zone, words tied to law, contracts, rights, science. These require fixed, stable definitions. Two flexible zones, words tied to slang, culture, metaphor, or everyday expression. These can bend without harm. Three gray zone, words tied to values, politics, or identity. These can flex in casual use, but must be nailed down in serious use. Keep your radar sharpest in the gray zone. This is where most manipulation hides. The discipline of context. Context is the key that decides whether a word belongs in the stable or flexible camp. In a courtroom, justice must be defined with precision. In a cafe conversation, justice can be discussed loosely. In a marketing slogan, justice is likely being manipulated. The discipline of context is simply this: match the definition to the stakes. The higher the stakes, the sharper the definition must be. Closing thought for Chapter 4. Words can stretch, but not all should. Some are the backbone of civilization and must remain stable. Others are the fabric of culture and can flex. The danger lies in mixing the two, treating playful words as serious or treating serious words as playful. The wise mind asks, is this word one that must stand firm, or one that can bend? Draw your fences accordingly. Transition to Part 2. We now have the foundations. What definitions are? Why vagueness corrodes them? How drift changes them? Where they must hold and where they may stretch. With this ground prepared, we can now move into the toolbox. The different kinds of definitions you can use, sharpen, and defend. In the next part, we will explore the core tools of defining identity words, boundary words, process words, value words, and operational definitions. Part 2, the core tools of defining. Chapter 5, identity words. What are identity words? Identity words are the anchors of language. They fix what a thing is. They don't describe feelings or opinions. They don't leave much room for flexibility. They draw a hard line. This, not that. Examples. Circle means a closed curve with all points equidistant from the center. Oxygen is a specific chemical element with the symbol O and atomic number 8. Human refers to a member of the species Homo sapiens. These words are not negotiable. They are not whatever you feel they mean. Their power is in their clarity. Why identity words matter. Without identity words, categories collapse. Imagine trying to build a bridge without a clear definition of steel, or writing a law without a clear definition of theft, or practicing medicine without a clear definition of disease. Identity words are the skeleton of thought. If they shift, the entire body of reasoning collapses. The trick of redefining identity words. Because identity words are so powerful, they are also tempting targets for manipulation. If you can change the definition of an identity word, you can reshape reality itself. Redefine person to include corporations, and suddenly corporations gain rights designed for humans. Redefine marriage, and entire cultural and legal structures shift. Redefine science from a method of testing to a fixed set of conclusions, and debate is shut down. By controlling the identity words, you control the categories. And by controlling the categories, you control the world built on them. Identity words in conflict. Sometimes societies split not because they disagree on values, but because they disagree on definitions. If one group defines life as beginning at conception, and another defines it as beginning at birth, then no amount of arguing over rights will resolve the clash. The battle is rooted in the identity word itself. If one person defines gender biologically and another defines it socially, they are not even speaking the same language. Clarity requires spotting the real battleground, not the conclusions, but the definitions that generate them. Defending identity words. To defend identity words, practice 3 steps. 1. Anchor them in reality. Tie them to observable, testable qualities. Example, circle can be drawn. Oxygen can be measured. 2. Protect them from drift. Don't let identity words slide into metaphor unless clearly marked. Example, it's fine to call a person a rock metaphorically, but remember that rock literally has a geological identity. 3. Spot the substitutions. When someone quietly redefines an identity word, stop them. Ask, by what definition? Everyday practice. You use identity words constantly without realizing it. When you call something a chair, you are asserting, this is furniture designed for sitting, not a table, not a ladder. When you call someone a friend, you are saying, this is a trusted ally, not a stranger or enemy. When you call something food, you are saying, this can be safely eaten, not poison. Even in daily life, blurred identity words create danger. If friend is stretched too far, trust breaks. If food is mislabeled, health suffers. Closing thought for Chapter 5. Identity words are the foundation stones of language. They fix what something is. Without them, categories dissolve, and reality itself becomes negotiable. To think clearly, you must guard them carefully. To argue clearly, you must agree on them first. To live clearly, you must know what is, before you can decide what ought to be. In the next chapter, we move from anchors to borders, from identity words to boundary words, which divide one category from another. Chapter 6. Boundary words. Lines that divide. If identity words fix what something is, boundary words fix what something is not. They divide categories, drawing the line that separates one thing from another. Alive versus dead. Citizen versus alien. Legal versus illegal. Inside versus outside. Boundary words are the doors and fences of language. They tell us where categories stop and start. Without them, everything bleeds together into a blur. The power of boundaries. Boundaries matter because decisions depend on them. In medicine, the boundary between healthy and disease determines treatment. In law, the boundary between legal and illegal determines punishment. In politics, the boundary between citizen and foreigner determines rights. These aren't just academic lines. They shape lives, distribute resources, and enforce consequences. When boundaries blur, blurring boundaries is one of the most common tricks of manipulation. If the line between truth and lie is blurred, propaganda can thrive. If the line between property and public resource is blurred, ownership becomes negotiable. If the line between violence and speech is blurred, laws against one can be used to control the other. When you blur a boundary, you don't just weaken a word. You weaken the structure built on that word. Boundary battles. Many of society's fiercest arguments are not about values, but about boundaries. Where does childhood end and adulthood begin? Where does life begin? Conception, heartbeat, viability, or birth? Where does freedom of speech stop? At harmful words, at offensive words, or only at direct incitement? Disagreements over boundaries often look like moral battles, but they are really definitional battles. The sides aren't even talking about the same categories. Boundary inflation and creep. One way boundaries are manipulated is through expansion or contraction. Boundary inflation. A category expands until it swallows too much. Example, if the word violence is expanded to include harsh words or offensive jokes, then ordinary disagreement becomes a crime. Boundary contraction. A category shrinks until important cases slip out of it. Example, if the word rights is narrowed until only certain groups qualify, protections vanish. Boundary inflation and contraction are weapons. They allow those in power to redraw the map to suit their needs. How to defend boundaries. 1. Ask for the line. When someone uses a boundary word, ask, where exactly is the line? What's included? What's excluded? 2. Spot expansion/contraction. Notice when the line is moving. Is it expanding to grab more? Contracting to exclude? 3. Tie back to reality. A good boundary must have a measurable anchor. Legal must tie to written law. Alive must tie to observable function. Everyday boundaries. Even in casual life, boundaries shape meaning. Is someone a guest or a stranger? Is a comment serious or sarcasm? Is your time work or rest? When boundaries are clear, relationships are stable. When boundaries blur, trust collapses. Closing thought for Chapter 6. Identity words tell us what something is. Boundary words tell us what something is not. Together, they form the structure of categories. Clarity depends on boundaries being drawn and defended. In the next chapter, we will turn from categories and lines to actions. How processed words, verbs, give shape to events and responsibilities. Chapter 7. Process words. The language of action. So far, we've looked at words that define things' identity and words that define boundaries, this versus that. But the world is not made only of things. It is made of actions, causes, and effects. That's where process words come in. They are verbs. They are the language of motion. To run, to promise, to steal, to heal, to vote. These are not just movements on a timeline. They are anchors of meaning that show who did what to whom and with what effect. Why process words matter. Process words carry responsibility. If someone borrows your car, you expect it back. If they steal it, you do not. The difference is not in the object. The car is the same, but in the action. If a government prints money, it may sound technical. If it inflates the currency, the consequences feel more obvious. Different verbs expose different chains of cause and effect. The trick of process words. One of the oldest tricks of manipulation is swapping out verbs to blur responsibility. A company says it restructured instead of fired workers. A politician says a bomb landed instead of was dropped. A report says someone passed away instead of was killed. The choice of verb decides whether an action is clear or concealed. Process words are often where truth is hidden. Precision in action. A sharp process word has 3 features. 1. It names the actor. Who did the action? Mistakes were made hides the actor. The minister lied exposes the actor. 2. It names the act. What was done? Adjusted staffing levels is fog. Fired 200 workers is clarity. 3. It names the effect. What changed? Intervened in the market is vague. Bought $3 billion in government bonds is exact. Good process words pull the curtain back. Bad ones add another curtain. Everyday examples. Process words shape even the smallest moments. If someone forgot to call you, that's one story. If they ignored your call, that's another. If they lied about calling, that's yet another. If a child spilled milk, it's an accident. If they threw the milk, it's an intention. The verb is the difference between accident, neglect, and malice, between trust and betrayal, between apology and punishment. Verbs in law and science. Nowhere is the precision of process words more important than in law and science. In law, assault is not the same as battery. One means threat, the other means contact. In science, theory is not just a guess. It means a tested and supported framework. Redefining it as speculation weakens understanding. These distinctions are not optional. They are the difference between justice and injustice, between knowledge and confusion. How to defend process words. 1. Insist on naming the actor. Don't accept passive fog like mistakes were made. 2. Watch for euphemism verbs. Collateralized often means hidden. Neutralized often means killed. 3. Trace consequences. A process word that doesn't connect to results is incomplete. Closing thought for Chapter 7. Nouns tell us what exists. Boundaries tell us where it ends. Verbs tell us what happens and who did it. If nouns are the skeleton of thought, verbs are the muscle. They give motion, strength, and responsibility to meaning. Guard them carefully, because when verbs are twisted, history itself can be rewritten. In the next chapter, we move into one of the trickiest territories: value words. The emotionally loaded terms like good, fair, and just that can inspire or deceive depending on how they are defined. Chapter 8. Value words. The loaded words. Not all words are neutral. Some come loaded with emotion. They carry not just meaning but moral weight. These are value words. Terms like good, fair, just, equal, right, safe. When someone uses a value word, they are not only describing reality, they are declaring judgment. They are telling you how to feel about it. Why value words are powerful? Value words are powerful because they short-circuit the brain. They trigger emotion before thought. If a politician says, "This is a matter of justice," you feel the pull to agree before you even know what they mean by justice. If an advertisement says, "Our food is healthy," you feel safe before you ask what healthy means in this context. Value words are verbal magnets. They pull emotion first and leave clarity for later, if it comes at all. The problem of hidden standards. Every value word hides a standard. Fair might mean equal treatment, equal outcome, or proportional reward. Safe might mean zero risk, reduced risk, or simply safer than the alternative. Good might mean moral, functional, or merely pleasing. If the standard is hidden, the word becomes a weapon. It lets the speaker smuggle in their definition while you project your own. You think you agree, but you don't, because you're standing on different standards. Examples in everyday life. A boss says, "We're making changes for the good of the company." Good for whom? Profits? Workers? Customers? A politician says, "This law will make things fairer." Fair by what rule? Equal treatment? Equal results? A parent says, "This is for your safety." Safe compared to what? At what cost? Each time, the value word sounds solid. But unless you surface the hidden standard, you are standing on sand. Weaponized value words. History is filled with examples of value words turned into tools of control. Freedom used to justify war. Equality used to justify censorship. Safety used to justify surveillance. Justice used to justify punishment before trial. In each case, the value word was not defined. It was left vague on purpose, so it could be stretched to cover actions that might not have survived clear scrutiny. How to defend against value words. When you hear a value word, always ask, 1, by what standard? Fair compared to what? Safe according to what measure? 2, for whom? Good for the speaker or for the audience. 3, at what cost? If safety is increased, what freedom is lost? If equality is increased, what distinction is erased? By dragging the hidden standard into the light, you strip the word of its manipulative power and turn it back into something you can evaluate. Everyday practice. You can practice with small examples. When a friend says, "That was a good movie," you can gently ask, "Good how? Story? Acting? Music?" When someone says, "This food is healthy," ask, "Healthy in what way? Low fat? Low sugar? Balanced nutrients?" When someone says, "It's only fair," ask, "Fair according to which rule?" These small habits build the muscle to resist larger manipulations in politics, media, or law. Closing thought for Chapter 8. Value words are the most seductive of all. They promise clarity while hiding confusion. They claim to unite while quietly dividing. Used carefully, they inspire. Used carelessly, they deceive. Used strategically, they control. Your defense is simple. Never let a value word pass without asking what it means. By what standard? for whom, and at what cost. In the next chapter, we'll finish the toolkit by exploring operational definitions, the scientific discipline of defining words in a way that can actually be tested. Chapter 9, Operational Definitions, from talk to test. So far, we've worked with definitions that mark identity, boundaries, actions, and values. But sometimes, none of that is enough. Sometimes you need a definition that can be tested in the real world. That is what an operational definition is. A definition that specifies not just what a word means, but how to recognize, measure, or test it. It turns language into something you can verify. Everyday examples. Tall is vague, but if you define tall as above 6 feet, you can test it with a measuring tape. Hot is vague, but if you define hot as above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, you can test it with a thermometer. Unemployment is vague, but if you define it as the percentage of working-age people actively seeking jobs who cannot find them, you can measure it with surveys and data. Operational definitions replace feelings with evidence. Why operational definitions matter. Without operational definitions, arguments can go in circles forever. Is this water clean? One person says yes, another says no. But if clean is operationally defined as fewer than 50 bacteria per milliliter, the argument can be tested. Is this child gifted? One teacher says yes, another says no. But if gifted is defined as IQ above 130 or creative output beyond age group, the label becomes measurable. Operational definitions turn opinions into claims that can be verified. The problem of hidden operations. But here's the trap. Operational definitions can also be manipulated by quietly choosing the wrong measurement. A government can redefine poverty by changing how income is calculated. A company can redefine safety by only counting accidents reported in a certain way. A study can redefine success by selecting favorable metrics. The trick is not in the word itself, but in the chosen test. If you control the test, you control the meaning. How to defend with operational definitions. When someone gives you a claim, ask, 1. What's the measure? How exactly are they testing or recognizing the word? 2. Who controls the test? Who chooses the metric? And do they benefit from it? 3. Does the test match the meaning? Is the measure actually capturing the idea? Or is it a distortion? Example, if school performance is measured only by standardized test scores, does that really capture learning? Or just memorization? Operational thinking in daily life. You don't need to be a scientist to use operational definitions. Instead of saying, I want to be healthier, say, I want to run a mile without stopping. Instead of saying, I'll spend less time on my phone, say, I'll check social media no more than 20 minutes a day. Instead of saying, I'll save more money, say, I'll transfer 10% of every paycheck into savings. Operational definitions turn vague goals into actionable steps. The balance. Operational definitions are not always possible. Not every word can be reduced to a number or test. Concepts like justice, love, or honor cannot be captured fully by operational rules. But even there, operational definitions can help clarify specific claims. For example, instead of arguing endlessly about whether a system is just, you might test specific outcomes: equal access to trials, consistent sentencing, or protection of rights. Operational clarity may not solve every debate, but it can prevent endless fog. Closing thought for Chapter 9. An operational definition is the most practical tool in your language arsenal. It turns words into claims you can check, test, or disprove. It replaces fog with evidence. But like every tool, it can be used for clarity or for manipulation. The question is always, does this test illuminate the truth or hide it? With this, you now have the full toolkit: identity words, boundary words, process words, value words, and operational definitions. Transition to Part 3. We've built the tools. Now it's time to learn how to use them defensively. Because once you know how definitions work, you'll see how often they're twisted against you. In the next part, We'll study the weapons of word manipulation and how to spot and disarm them. Part 3. Detecting and Defending. Chapter 10. Equivocation. One word, two meanings, one trick. Equivocation is one of the oldest tricks in the book. It happens when a single word is used in two different senses inside the same argument, allowing the speaker to slide from one meaning to another without being noticed. It is verbal shape shifting, a bait and switch with definitions. Example: only man is rational. No woman is a man. Therefore, no woman is rational. Here, man shifts meaning midstream. First meaning human being, then meaning male human. The trick hides in the sliding definition. Why equivocation works. Equivocation works because our brains are quick to assume continuity. If a word sounds the same, we assume it means the same. That shortcut saves time in honest conversation, but it becomes a trap when used deliberately. A skilled manipulator relies on this reflex. They plant a word in one sense, then reap it in another. The audience rarely notices the swap. Classic examples. 1. Freedom. Start. Freedom means living without government interference. End. That's why we need laws to enforce freedom. The word shifts from absence of control to presence of control. 2. Faith. Start. Faith means trust based on experience. End. That's why blind faith without evidence is good. The word shifts from earned trust to belief without reason. 3. Law. Start. Law is the natural order of things. End. That's why you must obey government decrees. The word shifts from principle of reality to policy of rulers. Equivocation in everyday life. Equivocation is not just for philosophers. You hear it in daily conversation. A parent says, "You should always follow the rules," but later says, "Break the rules, be creative." Two different meanings of rules. An ad says, "Our food is all natural." Natural as in not artificial, or natural as in found in nature. Poison ivy is natural too. A politician says, "We need change." Change as in reform, or change as in replacing one group's power with another's. The same word, two meanings, one trick. How to defend against equivocation. The antidote is simple but powerful. Pin the definition. 1. Stop the slide. When you hear a keyword, ask, which meaning are we using here? 2. Lock it down. Restate the word with a clear definition before continuing. Example: when you say freedom, do you mean freedom from interference or freedom granted by law? 3. Check for switches. Watch whether the word changes meaning later in the discussion. If you control the definition, you control the debate. The courage to interrupt. Equivocation thrives because people hesitate to interrupt. They feel it would be rude to pause and ask, "Wait, what do you mean by that?" But clarity is worth the interruption. The person using equivocation may not even realize they're doing it. Sometimes the trick is unconscious. Exposing it helps everyone sharpen their thought. Closing thought for Chapter 10. Equivocation is the word thief's favorite move. It steals clarity by sliding a word across two meanings. Your defense is vigilance. Notice when a word wobbles. Pin it down, and don't let it escape with two faces. When you master this, you'll see equivocation everywhere, in ads, in politics, in debates, in daily talk. And once you see it, the spell breaks. In the next chapter, we'll uncover a close cousin of equivocation: rebranding and euphemism, the art of changing labels to disguise reality. Chapter 11. Rebranding and euphemism, changing the label to hide the reality. Equivocation plays with two meanings of the same word. Rebranding takes a different path. It swaps the label itself. The thing remains the same, but the word attached to it is polished, softened, or completely replaced. This is the trick of euphemism, hiding harsh reality behind gentle words. And at a larger scale, it becomes rebranding, giving a whole concept or institution a new coat of paint. Euphemism, the soft covering. Euphemisms are everywhere. Firing workers becomes downsizing. Killing civilians becomes collateral damage. Raising taxes becomes revenue enhancement. Prison becomes correctional facility. The action doesn't change. Only the label does. And the new label dulls the emotional edge, making the unacceptable sound tolerable. Euphemism thrives in politics, war, medicine, and business. Anywhere someone wants to avoid backlash by hiding the sting of their actions. Rebranding. The big makeover. Rebranding is euphemism at scale. It doesn't just soften a single word. It remakes the entire image of a thing. Department of War becomes Department of Defense. Propaganda becomes public relations. Surveillance becomes safety monitoring. Gambling becomes gaming. Rebranding doesn't just hide. It reprograms perception. A rebranded label creates a new emotional frame. People forget what the old label meant and start thinking inside the new one. Why it works. Humans respond to labels more than we like to admit. Words act as shortcuts. If the word sounds good, we feel better about the thing itself. A carbon tax sounds heavy. A carbon credit sounds like an opportunity. Bailout sounds like rescue at others' expense. Stimulus package sounds like help for everyone. Torture is condemned. Enhanced interrogation is debated. The label doesn't just describe, it steers thought. The danger of forgetting. The real danger of rebranding is amnesia. Over time, people forget what the old word was, and the new one becomes normal. Few remember that shell shock became combat fatigue, which became post-traumatic stress disorder. Each shift dulled the rawness of war's effect on soldiers. Usury, once condemned as immoral lending, was rebranded simply as interest, then as finance. Slums were rebranded into urban renewal projects. The suffering didn't vanish, only the label did. When labels are erased, memory is erased. And when memory is erased, accountability is erased. How to defend against euphemism and rebranding. 1. Translate back. When you hear a polished term, mentally replace it with the raw one. Collateral damage dead civilians. Revenue enhancement tax increase. Correctional facility prison. 2. Ask. What changed? Did the thing itself change? Or only the label? 3. Track. The trail. What was this called before? Why was it rebranded? What was lost or hidden in the shift? Everyday rebranding. This isn't just political. You see it in daily life too. A messy garage sale becomes a vintage market. A used car becomes a pre-owned vehicle. Failure becomes a learning opportunity. Some rebranding is harmless, even helpful, but the habit of noticing it, of asking, what's really behind this new label, keeps you sharp. Closing thought for Chapter 11. Rebranding and euphemism are the cosmetics of language. They paint over reality, hoping you'll accept the appearance instead of the substance. Your defense is simple. Scrape off the paint. Translate the label back to what it means. If the new word makes the thing sound better, ask yourself whether the thing itself improved, or whether only the packaging did. In the next chapter, we'll tackle emotional packaging, words designed not just to soften reality, but to bypass logic entirely and go straight for your feelings. Chapter 12. Emotional packaging. When words bypass the brain, some words are chosen not to clarify but to trigger. They are wrapped in emotional charge, designed to slip past your reasoning mind and hit you in the gut. This is emotional packaging, language engineered to bypass logic. It doesn't just tell you what something is. It tells you how to feel about it before you've had a chance to think. The power of names. Consider how names shape reaction. The Patriot Act. Who wants to oppose patriotism? The Green New Deal. Green means fresh, natural, good. New means progress. Deal means fairness. War on terror. The name itself makes resistance feel like siding with the enemy. None of these names define the actual contents of the policy. They are wrappers. Packaging. And the packaging is emotional, not logical. How emotional packaging works. The trick rests on 2 moves. 1. Choose emotionally loaded words. Words tied to loyalty, fear, safety, justice, or morality. Two fuse them to the target, so the emotional response bleeds onto the subject itself. The result: people react emotionally to the package instead of analyzing the contents. Everyday examples. Emotional packaging isn't limited to politics. An ad calls the soda the choice of a new generation. A diet program is named Slim for Life. A phone is branded the Freedom Phone. The words are not definitions. They're emotional hooks. They bypass evidence and plug directly into desire. The double edge of emotional words. Not all emotional language is manipulation. Sometimes it inspires in good ways. Hope, courage, unity. The problem arises when emotion replaces substance. If a speech is filled with stirring words but no definitions, no evidence, no clear action, then it's not communication, it's performance. The danger of emotional packaging. Emotional packaging is dangerous because it creates preloaded conclusions. If you oppose the Patriot Act, are you unpatriotic? If you question the Green New Deal, are you against the planet? If you resist the war on terror, are you siding with terrorists? The emotion is baked into the name. Disagreeing feels like betrayal. How to defend against emotional packaging. 1. Strip the wrapper. When you hear an emotional phrase, translate it into plain terms. The Patriot Act, a law expanding government surveillance. Green New Deal, a set of economic and environmental policies. Freedom Phone, a mobile device sold with a political message. 2. Separate emotion from content. Ask, if this had a neutral name, how would I evaluate it? 3. Refuse the shortcut. Don't let the emotional word make the decision for you. Slow down and check the details. Practice spotting it. Try it in daily life. This food is heart healthy. What does that actually mean? This service is family friendly. Defined how? For which families? This is a community solution. Which community? Whose solution? Once you train your ear, emotional packaging becomes obvious. And once you see it, the spell weakens. Closing thought for Chapter 12. Emotional packaging is the linguistic equivalent of clickbait. It promises, it stirs, it excites, but it often conceals more than it reveals. Your defense is disassembly. Strip away the packaging and examine the contents. The truth is rarely in the wrapper. In the next chapter, we'll expose the emptiest form of all. Empty words. Phrases that sound powerful, but dissolve the moment you try to pin them down. 13. Chapter 13. Empty words. When sound replaces meaning. Some words don't just blur, rebrand, or emotionally manipulate. Some words have no real substance at all. They are hollow shells, impressive to the ear, but empty in definition. These are empty words. They sound strong, but the moment you try to pin them down, they dissolve. The illusion of strength. Empty words thrive on performance. They are chosen because they sound important, not because they communicate anything. Examples: stakeholder synergy, sustainable equity, innovative solutions, strategic partnerships. Each phrase feels weighty, but ask for details, and the fog clears into nothing. What exactly is being said? Usually very little. Why empty words persist? Empty words are survival tools for people who want to sound informed without committing to meaning. Politicians use them to fill speeches without promising specifics. Businesses use them to reassure investors without revealing strategy. Bureaucracies use them to mask inaction with activity. Empty words give the appearance of clarity while providing none. They are the linguistic version of smoke machines. The comfort of vagueness. Empty words also persist because they comfort the audience. They let people hear what they want. Sustainable might mean environmental to one person, financial to another. Equity might mean fairness to one group, equal outcomes to another. Innovation might mean new technology, or simply rebranding the old. The emptiness allows everyone to nod along without realizing they are agreeing to different things. How to spot empty words. Empty words reveal themselves through 3 tells. 1. They cannot be defined. If you ask, what do you mean by that? The speaker cannot give a clear answer. 2. They cannot be measured. There is no way to test whether the promise has been met. 3. They can be replaced without loss. Swap synergy for teamwork and nothing changes. Replace strategic partnership with working together, and the meaning remains. The jargon was only padding. Everyday empty words. Listen closely in meetings, ads, and media. A company claims to deliver cutting-edge solutions. Translation: we're doing something, but we won't tell you what. A campaign promises systemic reform. Translation: change of some kind. Details later. A self-help book tells you to unlock your potential. Translation: try harder. The power is not in the content, but in the impression. How to defend against empty words. 1. Ask for definition. What exactly do you mean by equity? 2. Ask for action. What will this innovation actually do? 3. Ask for testability. How will we know if this partnership is successful? If the word cannot survive these tests, it is empty. The discipline of translation. A useful habit is to translate empty words into plain speech. We're pursuing holistic sustainability. We want things to last longer. We're leveraging strategic synergies. 2 departments are working together. We're fostering inclusivity. We're making sure more people feel welcome. Once translated, the word either reveals meaning or collapses into nonsense. Either way, clarity returns. Closing thought for Chapter 13. Empty words are the hollow currency of modern communication. They sound rich but buy nothing. The cure is relentless clarity. Translate them. Test them. Strip away the performance until you see whether there is substance underneath. If there is none, call it what it is. Noise disguised as language. Transition to Part 4. We have now exposed the tricks. Equivocation: 1 word, 2 meanings. Rebranding: new labels for old realities. Emotional packaging: words designed to bypass logic. Empty words: language that vanishes on contact. With these defenses in place, you're ready to step into Part 4, applied definition work, where we practice clarity in real settings, in daily conversation, in work and study, in media and advertising, and even in defining ourselves. 14. Part 4, applied definition work. Chapter 14, everyday clarity, the hidden power of simple conversations. Most of the battles over meaning don't happen in courts, campaigns, or contracts. They happen in kitchens, classrooms, and text messages. Everyday conversations are where definitions slip, where misunderstandings grow, and where clarity matters most. You don't need to be a lawyer or a philosopher to guard definitions. You only need to be a listener and a questioner. The everyday fog. Think of the last time you argued with a friend or family member. Chances are, the conflict wasn't really about values, but about words. One person says, "You never listen." The other says, "I always listen." What's happening? They're using different definitions of listening. One means agree with me. The other means let me talk without interrupting. Or imagine this. Someone says, "You're being rude." You reply, "I'm just being honest." The clash is definitional. Rude for them means blunt. Honest for you means truthful. Without clarity, the words spark heat instead of light. The habit of asking. The single most powerful tool in daily life is the question. What do you mean by that? It's not an attack. It's an invitation. It slows the conversation and forces both sides to surface the definitions hiding under the words. You say, "I'm not listening." What does listening mean to you? You say, "This feels fair." Fair in what sense? You say you're upset because of respect. What does respect look like in this situation? This habit shifts conversations from emotional collision to definitional clarity. Clarity as kindness. At first, asking for definitions may feel confrontational, but in truth, it is one of the kindest things you can do in conversation. Why? Because it shows you want to understand the other person on their terms, not just project your meaning onto their words. Clarity is respect. It is far more respectful to say, "Help me understand what you mean by that," than to argue endlessly against a word you haven't defined together. Everyday misfires. Here are a few common traps you can escape with definition work. You're always late. Does late mean past the exact start time or past a grace period? This is boring. Does boring mean predictable, slow, irrelevant, or simply difficult? That's offensive. Offensive by personal feeling, cultural code, or agreed standard. Each time, the emotional charge of the word can vanish once the definition is clarified. Micro-clarity practice. Try this as a daily exercise. 1. Pick a conversation where tension arises. 2. Notice the key word carrying the conflict. 3. Ask, gently, what does that word mean to you here? 4. Restate it in your own words to confirm. Do this enough, and you'll find many conflicts dissolve before they ignite. The ripple effect. When you bring clarity into everyday talk, 2 things happen. 1. Misunderstandings shrink. Arguments lose fuel once you see you weren't even disagreeing. You were just using words differently. 2. Trust grows. People feel heard when you care enough to ask what they mean. In a world trained to argue first and define later, being the one who defines first is a superpower. Closing thought for Chapter 14. Everyday clarity is not about winning arguments. It is about building bridges. The question, what do you mean by that, may seem small, but it can rescue relationships, save hours of conflict, and replace confusion with connection. In the next chapter, we'll move into the workplace and classroom, where clarity becomes not just kindness, but a prerequisite for solving problems. Chapter 15. Work and study. Clarity before action. In work and study, time is precious. Misunderstandings wasted. Whole projects collapse because the team never agreed on what the words meant at the start. The most overlooked rule of problem solving is simple. Define before you design. Clarify before you calculate. Agree before you act. The workplace trap. Picture a team meeting. The manager says, we need to improve efficiency. Sounds clear, until you ask what efficiency means. To one person, it means cutting costs. To another, it means speeding production. To another, it means reducing errors. If each person leaves with their own definition, the team is no longer solving one problem. They're solving 3 different ones and pulling in 3 different directions. This happens everywhere. We need innovation. We need accountability. We need collaboration. Each word sounds solid, but without definition, they are empty banners. Teams march under them, but no one is marching to the same place. The student trap. The same happens in study. A student sits down to answer a question on an exam. Discuss justice in the legal system. What does justice mean here? Retribution, equality, fair process? Without definition, the student writes pages of words that float without anchor. Or take mathematics. If you don't define your terms at the beginning, what the variables mean, what the conditions are, you can run an entire calculation and end with a beautiful answer to the wrong question. In both work and study, unclear definitions create wasted effort. How to apply definition work. To avoid these traps, use 3 simple practices. 1. Define the key terms at the start. By efficiency, do we mean cost per unit or speed of delivery? By innovation, do we mean new technology or new methods? 2. Write the definitions down in a project charter, syllabus, or outline. Record the definitions everyone agrees to. A spoken agreement can drift. A written one holds. 3. Check consistency as you go. Midway through the work, ask, are we still using the word success the same way we did at the start? These habits save endless backtracking. Case study. A failed project. A city government once launched a program to increase affordable housing. The teams involved, architects, planners, financiers, politicians, all charged forward. But affordable was never defined. To the politicians, it meant rent capped at 30% of income. To the financiers, it meant within reach of middle-income buyers. To the activists, it meant rent controlled for low-income families. After 2 years and millions spent, the program collapsed under lawsuits, protests, and budget overruns. The failure was not in the money or the labor. The failure was in the word. The clarity shortcut. In both work and study, here's a shortcut. If you can't define it, don't start it. Don't solve a problem until you agree on what the problem is. Don't chase a goal until you know what the goal means. Clarity saves time. Clarity saves effort. Clarity prevents failure disguised as progress. Closing thought for Chapter 15. Work and study are not just about effort. They're about alignment. And alignment begins with definition. Before you work, define. Before you study, define. Before you act, define. Do that, and half your battles are won before they begin. In the next chapter, we'll widen the lens. Not the office, not the classroom, but the media and advertising that shape how whole populations think, often by twisting or softening definitions. Chapter 16. Media and ads, the marketplace of words. If everyday talk is where words slip, and workplaces are where words collapse projects, then media and advertising are where words are twisted most deliberately. Here, vagueness isn't an accident. It's a business model. Manipulation isn't a side effect. It's the strategy. Media and ads thrive not on clarity, but on influence. And influence depends on bending definitions. Advertising. Selling with slippery words. Think about the words you see in commercials and packaging. Natural. Safe. Eco-friendly. Wholesome. Premium. None of these words have stable definitions in advertising law. They are meant to sound good, not to inform. Poison ivy is natural. Lead paint was once considered safe. A product can be wrapped in eco-friendly plastic that still pollutes for centuries. The trick works because consumers rarely ask, what does this word actually mean here? The emotional play. Ads use emotional packaging chapter 12 as their main fuel. A car isn't just a machine. It's freedom. A phone isn't just technology. It's connection. A pair of shoes isn't just fabric. It's identity. By shifting definitions, advertisers move products out of the realm of facts and into the realm of feelings. Once you buy the feeling, the details don't matter. Media, the theater of words. News media works in similar ways, though with higher stakes. Headlines are often written for maximum impact, not maximum clarity. Consider these pairs of headlines about the same event. Protesters clash with police. Police crack down on rioters. One defines the crowd as protesters. The other defines them as rioters. Same people, same event. But the boundary word chapter 6 shifts the entire frame of meaning. Or look at words like regime versus government, whistleblower versus traitor, collateral damage versus civilian deaths. The choice of word decides not just the story, but the audience's reaction. Why definitions are weapons in media. Media definitions shape public opinion. They determine what counts as normal, acceptable, or dangerous. Redefine tax cut as a gift to the rich, and it becomes theft. Redefine tax cut as giving people back their money, and it becomes justice. Redefine protest as domestic terrorism, and civil disobedience becomes criminal. Redefine propaganda as messaging, and manipulation becomes strategy. Words and headlines are not neutral. They are weapons. The danger of passive consumption. The greatest danger is that people consume media and ads passively. They absorb the words without questioning the definitions. Over time, the definitions settle into the mind as if they were facts. If you hear the international community often enough, you may forget to ask, which countries are actually included? Who decided that? If you hear scientists say often enough, you may forget to ask, which scientists? Defined by what study? Passive listening turns borrowed words into borrowed thoughts. How to defend against media and ad manipulation. 1. Interrogate the word. When you hear a charged word in a headline or ad, pause and ask, what does this mean, specifically? 2. Translate back to reality. Replace collateral damage with civilians killed. Replace eco-friendly with biodegradable within X years. 3. Notice the pattern. Track which outlets or brands keep using vague or rebranded words. Patterns reveal intent. Everyday exercise. These small acts transform you from consumer into critic. Closing thought for Chapter 16. Advertising and media are built on word tricks. They thrive on vagueness, rebranding, emotional packaging, and empty phrases. Your defense is not cynicism, but clarity. You don't need to distrust every headline or commercial. You only need to ask, what does this word mean here? And who benefits from me accepting it without question? In the next chapter, we'll turn inward to personal identity, how the definitions you accept about yourself shape your choices, your confidence, and your freedom. Chapter 17, Personal Identity, the words you wear. Every society gives you labels. Some you inherit, some you choose, some are forced onto you whether you like them or not. These labels are identity words, see Chapter 5. But here they are applied not to triangles or chemicals. They are applied to you. What you call yourself, and what you allow others to call you, shapes not just how people see you, but how you see yourself. Self-definition shapes behavior. If a student accepts the label bad at math, they stop trying. If an employee accepts the label replaceable, they stop negotiating. If a person accepts the label victim, they may give up the agency to change. Conversely, if someone redefines themselves as a learner, they approach math with curiosity. If they redefine themselves as valuable, they demand fair treatment. If they redefine themselves as a survivor, they reclaim power. The same reality, different definitions, different lives. The danger of borrowed labels. Many of the most harmful identity definitions are borrowed. Family may define you as lazy. Media may define you as not enough. Institutions may define you as just a number. If you never stop to question these definitions, they sink into your self-image. You begin to act according to words that were never truly yours. The power of redefinition. One of the most radical acts of freedom is redefining yourself. I'm not a failure. I'm a beginner. I'm not broken. I'm healing. I'm not trapped. I'm preparing to move. Changing the words changes the frame, and once the frame shifts, choices open that were invisible before. When labels become chains. But beware, even chosen labels can harden into prisons. Someone defines themselves as successful, but the definition is tied only to wealth. When money slips, identity shatters. Someone defines themselves as artist, but only if they are recognized publicly. When recognition fades, they feel erased. A healthy definition of self must be both stable and flexible, firm enough to anchor you, flexible enough to adapt. Practical identity work. Here's a simple exercise for personal clarity. 1. List the labels you wear: parent, worker, student, friend, activist, believer, skeptic. 2. Ask, who gave me this label? Did I choose it? Was it handed down? Was it forced? 3. Ask, what does this word mean to me? Define it clearly. Don't let it sit vague. 4. Ask, does this label serve me or chain me? If it chains you, redefine it or discard it. The social mirror. Remember that self-definitions are rarely isolated. They interact with how society defines you. Sometimes the two align. Sometimes they clash. Clarity here is not about rejecting all outside definitions. It's about knowing which ones you choose to keep and which ones you refuse to wear. Closing thought for Chapter 17. You are not just living inside language. Language is living inside you. The words you use to define yourself can either shrink or expand your world. Guard them as fiercely as you guard any other definition. Because in the end, the most important fence of meaning is the one you draw around your own identity. Transition to Part V. We've applied definition work to daily life, to work and study, to media and advertising, and to personal identity. Now we turn to the final part of this book, living with precision. This is not just about using definitions when needed, but about cultivating a mindset, a way of living in which clarity becomes second nature, and language itself becomes a daily discipline. Part V, Living with Precision. Chapter 18, Habits of Definition. Clarity as a daily practice. So far, we've treated definitions as tools, things you pick up when you need them. But the deepest clarity comes when definition is not just a tool, it's a habit. When you make clarity automatic, you stop waiting until confusion arises. You build your life on solid ground from the start. The core habit. Ask the question. The most important habit of all is the question you've seen repeated throughout this book. What does this word mean? It may sound too simple, but it is the hinge of clarity. With this single question, you stop manipulation before it starts. You dissolve conflicts before they ignite, and you focus discussions before they scatter. Micro habits of clarity. Here are a few small practices that build precision into daily life. 1. Pause on key words. When someone uses a loaded word, fair, safe, justice, freedom, stop and ask what it means in context. 2. Restate in your own words. After someone explains, repeat it back. So when you say fair, you mean equal chances, not equal outcomes? This not only checks understanding but shows respect. 3. Define before debating. Before arguing, agree on what the key word means. Otherwise, you're wrestling shadows. 4. Notice your own drift. Pay attention to when you use the same word in different senses. Correct yourself before others need to. The discipline of slowing down. Most confusion spreads because people rush. They assume everyone shares the same meaning and plow ahead. Precision requires slowing down, not paralysis, not overanalysis. Just enough pause to make sure the fence is clear before building on it. The social benefit of habits. Living with definition habits doesn't just protect you, it helps everyone around you. In family life, it reduces needless arguments. In workplaces, it saves time and resources. In friendships, it prevents offense born of misunderstanding. In communities, it builds trust. Clarity is contagious. The more you model it, the more others will adopt it. From effort to reflex. At first, asking for definitions feels like effort. You have to remember to pause, to clarify, to restate. But over time, it becomes reflex. You no longer need to stop and remind yourself. You begin to hear vagueness instantly, to spot equivocation without trying, to translate empty words on the fly. The work becomes automatic. That's when definition becomes not just a skill, but a mindset. Closing thought for Chapter 18. Habits are what turns skill into character, and the habit of definition is what turns occasional clarity into a life of clarity. Make the question, what does this word mean, part of your daily rhythm. Do that long enough, and confusion will find less and less room to live in your mind. Transition to Chapter 19. Chapter 19. Teaching clarity. Why teaching matters. Clarity is not just for you. Once you learn to see through vague words, shifting definitions, and empty slogans, you'll notice how often the people around you are still trapped in them. If you stop at personal clarity, you protect yourself. But if you pass clarity on, you begin to protect your family, your friends, your students, your coworkers. Teaching clarity is multiplication. One clear mind becomes many. Start simple. Clarity is best taught not with lectures, but with simple questions. To a child, what do you mean by fair? Fair like equal shares, or fair like everyone gets what they need? To a coworker, when you say efficiency, do you mean speed or cost? To a friend, when you say they disrespected you, what does respect look like to you? The goal isn't to embarrass, but to model curiosity. When you ask, you teach. Teaching by example. The most effective way to teach clarity is to live it. People notice when you consistently pause to define before arguing. Translate vague words into precise ones. Restate terms until everyone agrees. Clarity modeled is clarity multiplied. A single person who insists on definition in meetings conversations, or classrooms shifts the tone for everyone. Teaching children. Children are natural sponges for words, but also natural victims of vagueness. When a child says, "That's not fair," ask them, "What does fair mean to you?" Help them distinguish between equal, deserved, or kind. When a child says, "I'm bad at this," ask, "What does bad mean?" Bad compared to yesterday, or compared to someone else. By teaching children to unpack their words, you are giving them tools to defend themselves for life. They will grow up harder to manipulate and easier to reason with. Teaching adults. Adults resist being taught, but they respond well to clarity when it saves time or prevents conflict. In meetings. Before we continue, let's define success for this project. In debates. Before we argue, can we agree on what justice means in this context? In friendships. When you say you feel ignored, what does ignored mean for you? Adults learn best when they experience the relief of clarity. Show them how much smoother things run when definitions are firm, and they'll pick up the habit. Group clarity tools. Here are practical methods you can use when teaching clarity in groups. 1. The definition round. Everyone in the group states their definition of a key word. Write them down. Compare. The differences often dissolve conflict instantly. 2. The risk statement game. Person A makes a claim. Person B restates it in their own words until person A says, "Yes, that's what I mean." This trains listening and sharpens language. 3. The forbidden word exercise. Take a vague word like fair, safe, or progress, and forbid its use until everyone defines it. Watch how hard and revealing the exercise becomes. The ripple effect of teaching clarity. Every time you teach clarity, you plant seeds. That seed may sprout in a child's confidence, a friend's decision-making, or a colleague's ability to cut through nonsense. Over time, a culture of clarity grows. Less manipulation, fewer wasted arguments, more trust. Closing thought for Chapter 19. Teaching clarity is not about being the smartest in the room. It's about making sure everyone in the room can think and speak more clearly. The real power of clarity is not in keeping it. It's in sharing it. Transition to Chapter 20. Chapter 20. The definition mindset. From tools to worldview. By now, you've learned the foundations, the tools, the defenses, and the applications of definition. But the real shift comes when clarity stops being something you do and becomes something you are. This is the definition mindset, the way of living where words are no longer cages or traps, but tools in your hands. Living with words as tools. When you live with precision, you stop being easily manipulated because you no longer accept vague slogans at face value. You stop wasting energy on false arguments because you catch the definitional clash before the fight begins. You stop being confused by shifting language because you can trace words back to their stable roots. Words no longer bully you. You use them the way a craftsman uses tools, carefully, intentionally, and with purpose. Freedom through clarity. The definition mindset is not about winning debates or correcting everyone else's grammar. It's about freedom. When you guard definitions, you guard your mind. You keep your thoughts from being hijacked by slogans, from being blurred by drift, or from being trapped by someone else's framing. And once your mind is free, your choices are free. The 3 reflexes of the definition mindset. To live this way, develop 3 reflexes. 1. Always ask what a word means. Don't let any key word pass without definition. Fair by what measure? Safe compared to what? Progress for whom? 2. Always anchor in reality. Tie words back to observable facts or agreed standards. Don't argue about clouds. Pin them to the ground. 3. Always watch for shifts. Track when words drift mid-conversation or when someone rebrands an action with a softer label. These reflexes turn you into a defender of clarity without effort. Clarity as strength. Living with definition doesn't mean you'll never be challenged. It means you'll be stronger in every challenge. In conversation, you'll cut through fog. In study, you'll waste less effort. In media, you'll see through spin. In self-identity, you'll choose your own labels instead of wearing borrowed ones. Clarity doesn't remove difficulty, but it removes confusion. And confusion is the greatest hidden enemy of progress. Closing thought for Chapter 20. The definition mindset is living with eyes open. It is refusing to let language be a leash. It is treating words not as weapons against you, but as tools in your hands. If you make this shift, you won't just think more clearly. You'll live more freely. Transition to closing transmission. We've reached the end of the course. Now it's time to put the pieces together. Logic as structure, definitions as language, and the two united as the firewall of clarity. Closing transmission. Language is not decoration. It is the bridge between thought and reality. Logic gives the bridge its structure. Definitions give it its material. Together, they form the firewall of clarity, the shield that guards your mind from confusion and control. Throughout this book, you have seen how words can be sharpened or dulled, stretched or anchored, used as tools or twisted into traps. You've learned to build foundations with stable definitions. Use tools like identity words, boundary words, process words, value words, and operational definitions. Defend yourself against equivocation, rebranding, emotional packaging, and empty words. Apply clarity in daily life, in work and study, in media, and in your own identity. Live with precision, building habits, teaching others, and carrying a definition mindset. The world will always be full of vague promises, slippery slogans, and hollow words. But once you train yourself to ask, what does this word mean? You are no longer at their mercy. The firewall of clarity. Clarity is not about being difficult. It's about being free. Free from manipulation. Free from wasted conflict. Free from confusion that hides in careless words. When you hold definitions firmly, you hold your mind firmly. No one can move you with empty language because you can see through it. No one can trap you with slogans because you can demand clarity before agreement. The last word. Words are containers. If the container is cracked, meaning leaks. If the container is twisted, meaning deceives. If the container is strong, meaning is safe. The work of this book is to make your container strong. So go forward with your words sharpened. Define before you decide. Clarify before you commit. Guard the fences of meaning. And remember, when you live with definitions as tools, you live with freedom as reality. End of Definition Academy. The language of clarity.